A lifetime of sacrifice and silent struggle is a story often untold, hidden behind the polite smiles and daily routines of those who quietly carry burdens not of their own choosing. It is the story of individuals who put the needs of others above their own, who spend decades meticulously balancing responsibilities, expectations, and personal dreams while never allowing themselves the luxury of rest or recognition. Sacrifice, in its purest form, is not merely giving, but giving continuously without pause, often in the absence of gratitude or acknowledgement. It is choosing to absorb hardships for the sake of others, taking on financial strain, emotional labor, and personal compromises in a way that leaves the sacrificer's own life incomplete or deferred indefinitely. Such individuals often feel an unshakable sense of duty, a moral or emotional contract that compels them to endure, even when the toll on their own well-being is profound. This silent struggle, then, becomes an internal war, one that wages itself in quiet moments during sleepless nights, in fleeting pauses between obligations, and in the private contemplation of what might have been if life had allowed them to prioritize themselves. For those living a lifetime of sacrifice, the demands are not always overt. They often present as familial expectations, societal pressures, or even personal vows made in moments of crisis, loss, or commitment. The person who sacrifices does so often with love, out of a deep-seated desire to protect or uplift those they care for. Yet love alone cannot make the weight of responsibility light. Every day becomes a series of choices where personal comfort, ambition, and desire are set aside in favor of the immediate needs of others. A parent working multiple jobs to ensure their children never go hungry, a sibling covering expenses for a brother or sister who refuses to earn their own way, or a caregiver abandoning their own career ambitions to be present in someone else's life. These are the visible threads of a tapestry woven in selflessness. Beneath the surface, however, lies a complex landscape of fatigue, frustration, and the creeping resentment that often accompanies the unacknowledged efforts of a lifetime. The silent struggle is equally as powerful as the act of sacrifice itself. While sacrifice demands visible action, struggle often resides in the mind and heart, unseen by those who benefit from it. It is in the quiet moments when the sacrifice is made feel invisible, when gratitude is absent, and the acknowledgement that one's efforts have been taken for granted or worse, exploited sinks in. These struggles are seldom expressed outwardly, for the individual feels both compelled to protect others and constrained by their own sense of duty or guilt. Emotional suppression becomes a daily exercise, as feelings of anger, disappointment, and exhaustion are locked away, hidden behind smiles, politeness, and the continuation of responsibilities. In many cases, the silent struggle is compounded by the fear of judgment or the belief that one's suffering is insignificant in comparison to the needs of others. Over time, this accumulation of unvoiced pain can become almost invisible to outsiders, who perceive only the stability and generosity that mask the inner turmoil. A lifetime of sacrifice often comes with the expectation of reward that is never verbalized, but deeply felt a hope that at some point, effort will be recognized, that loyalty and care will be met with appreciation. Yet life does not always adhere to fairness or gratitude, and those who give selflessly may find themselves repeatedly tested, taken advantage of, or confronted with betrayal. The absence of recognition or reciprocation can be devastating, causing the individual to question the worth of their continuous giving. Still, many endure, bound by the sense of responsibility they have cultivated over decades. This endurance is not born from ignorance or weakness, but from a strength that is often invisible to the world. The ability to maintain composure and generosity, even when hurt, to continue providing care and support while silently managing personal loss, and to navigate the emotional minefields of relationships where others may never understand the price of the sacrifices made. The weight of a lifetime spent sacrificing for others also profoundly impacts identity. Personal dreams, career goals, and even daily comforts are postponed, abandoned, or reshaped entirely to accommodate the needs of family, friends, or dependents. Aspirations once vivid in youth may fade to distant memories, replaced by pragmatism, survival, and the unrelenting focus on sustaining others. In the quiet hours, the sacrificer often contemplates the life that could have been, the adventures never taken, and the freedom never fully experienced. Yet even in reflection, there is a paradoxical satisfaction, a deep awareness that the struggles endured have provided security, comfort, or opportunity to those they love, creating a ripple effect that might never be noticed, but whose impact is undeniable. What defines a lifetime of sacrifice and silent struggle is not simply endurance, but also resilience, the ability to continue giving, loving, and supporting in the face of repeated challenges requires an extraordinary capacity for patience, compassion, and emotional strength. It is a resilience built on repeated acts of selflessness, on the courage to face exhaustion and disappointment without surrendering, and on the unspoken hope that one day, the silent labor will be honored in some form, even if only through the personal satisfaction of having done the right thing. Yet this story is also a cautionary tale. Without boundaries, without moments of self-care, and without recognition of the toll such sacrifices take, even the strongest individuals risk losing themselves, their dignity, or the life they might have built alongside their acts of giving. Ultimately, a lifetime of sacrifice and silent struggle is a testament to the human capacity for love, endurance, and moral commitment, but it is also a reminder that the noblest acts require balance. True generosity cannot exist without acknowledgement of personal needs, and silent endurance must eventually intersect with self-preservation. It is in this delicate equilibrium, where giving and self-care coexist, that the story of sacrifice finds its fullest meaning, where struggles are no longer hidden but managed, and where life can be rebuilt not just for others, but for the individual who has carried the weight of a lifetime in quiet devotion. The moment generosity met entitlement is a moment that can transform relationships, redefine boundaries, and reveal the stark differences between giving from love and being taken for granted. It is the instant when selfless acts, performed with hope and care, collide with the expectation of unearned reward, creating a tension that often leaves one party stunned and the other feeling justified. Generosity, in its truest form, is an act of giving without expectation of return. It is a gift that comes from the heart, a conscious decision to invest resources, time, or emotional energy into someone else's life. Those who give freely often do so because they value the happiness or well-being of others above their own comfort, sometimes sacrificing their own desires, stability, or dreams to ensure others are supported. This kind of giving is inherently vulnerable because it relies on the belief that one's intentions will be understood, appreciated, or at least respected. Entitlement, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It is the assumption that resources, care, or attention are owed, that the world, or at least certain people, exist to provide what one desires, regardless of effort or contribution. The meeting of these two forces, generosity and entitlement, creates a moment of collision that is often as revealing as it is painful. In this moment, the generous individual realizes that their goodwill has been mistaken for obligation. Every thoughtful action, every carefully planned effort, every sacrifice once offered out of love or duty is suddenly reframed in the mind of the entitled as a right. It is not seen as a choice, but as a tool to be leveraged. This realization can be devastating because it reframes years of giving into a ledger of debt that never existed, exposing the vulnerability inherent in human kindness. The shock of entitlement is not always immediate. It often begins subtly. A dismissive remark, a sarcastic comment, or a failure to acknowledge effort can slowly erode the sense of appreciation a giver expects. Yet, when entitlement fully asserts itself, it erupts into moments of confrontation, screaming, accusations, demands, or manipulations designed to enforce an expectation that should never have existed. The collision is electric, leaving one party defensive, hurt, or disillusioned, while the other feels justified in their bold assertion of perceived rights. The psychological landscape of this moment is complex. The generous individual experiences confusion and disbelief first, struggling to reconcile the discrepancy between their intentions and the reaction they receive. Generosity is not performed for recognition, yet it is natural to expect acknowledgement of effort, or at least a basic respect for the sacrifices made. When entitlement meets this generosity, it can feel like a betrayal, a misreading of the very foundation upon which the relationship was built. The entitled individual, however, experiences a sense of legitimacy, often reinforced by years of enabling, permissiveness, or unchallenged indulgence. To them, the act of giving is not an extraordinary gesture, but the baseline expectation for how others should behave. This misalignment creates a profound emotional rift, one that forces the generous individual to confront the uncomfortable truth. Their kindness has been exploited, and the dynamic they once nurtured has become toxic. The moment itself often arrives abruptly, leaving little time for measured response. A carefully prepared gift, a financial contribution, or even a simple act of help can trigger the entitled reaction. The collision is amplified when the generosity is sincere and significant, because the contrast between what is offered and the dismissive or demanding response is heightened. This is when long-standing patterns of behavior become unmistakable, when the extent of entitlement is revealed in full clarity. What might have been tolerated or explained away in the past becomes undeniable evidence of imbalance. The generous individual is confronted with the harsh reality that their efforts have been treated as a utility, a service, or a resource to be consumed at will, rather than as an expression of care and thoughtfulness. Navigating this moment requires clarity and courage. The generous individual must recognize that their willingness to give does not equate to an obligation to sacrifice indefinitely. Boundaries, once blurred, must be redrawn with precision and consistency. Saying no, refusing to continue enabling, or confronting entitlement head-on are necessary steps to prevent further exploitation. In many cases, this is the first step toward reclaiming personal power and protecting emotional and financial well-being. The entitled, when confronted with limits, often reacts with surprise, denial, or even anger. As their expectations are challenged, the dynamic of the relationship may shift irreversibly, revealing who truly respects generosity and who only seeks to exploit it. The long-term implications of the collision between generosity and entitlement are profound. Generosity, when met with appreciation, builds trust, strengthens bonds, and cultivates mutual respect. But when it meets entitlement, it can become a source of resentment, emotional depletion, and financial strain. The generous individual may feel guilt for prioritizing their own needs, but in truth, it is an essential act of self-preservation. Allowing entitlement to go unchecked not only undermines the giver's resources and energy, but also perpetuates cycles of dependency and manipulation that are harmful to all parties involved. The moment of collision is, therefore, also a moment of awakening, a recognition that giving without discernment, without boundaries, and without accountability can have consequences far beyond the original intention. Ultimately, the moment generosity meets entitlement is a lesson in self-awareness, resilience, and discernment. It teaches the giver that kindness must be tempered with wisdom, that boundaries are not cruelty, and that protecting one's own well-being is not a betrayal of love. It exposes the fragility of relationships built on unequal exchange and highlights the importance of balancing compassion with assertiveness. While painful, this moment can also be transformative, providing the clarity necessary to distinguish between those who genuinely value generosity and those who exploit it. It is a defining juncture, a turning point where the generous must choose between continued self-sacrifice or the courage to reclaim agency, ensuring that future acts of giving are met with respect, gratitude, and reciprocity rather than exploitation. Breaking free from financial exploitation is a journey that is both deeply personal and universally challenging. It is the moment when an individual recognizes that their resources, their labor, and their generosity have been misused, manipulated, or taken for granted, often by those they trusted most. Financial exploitation is rarely a sudden revelation. It often creeps in quietly, hidden beneath the guise of familial obligation, friendship, or loyalty. It may begin with small favors, occasional loans, or casual support, and over time, escalate into a pattern where the exploited individual is expected to shoulder the burden of others. Irresponsibility. Those who fall victim to financial exploitation often experience a mixture of confusion, guilt, and self-blame because the people who take advantage of them are frequently close relatives or trusted associates. Recognizing the need to break free is the first step in reclaiming autonomy, dignity, and control over one's life. But it is also the hardest. The decision to confront financial exploitation is rarely straightforward. It often involves a painful reassessment of relationships that were once considered safe, supportive, or loving. Betrayal cuts deep when it comes from people whose needs one has spent years prioritizing. The exploited individual must grapple with the realization that their generosity has been treated as an entitlement rather than a gift. Every dollar spent, every opportunity sacrificed, and every favor granted becomes a reminder that boundaries were ignored, values were trampled, and trust was violated. The emotional weight of this recognition is compounded by a sense of responsibility. There is often an internalized belief that one is failing if the people who have relied on them suffer as a result of newly enforced limits. Overcoming these feelings requires courage, clarity, and a willingness to prioritize one's own stability over the comfort of others. Breaking free begins with awareness. The exploited individual must honestly evaluate patterns of behavior and the consequences of continued support. This involves tracking financial transactions, assessing the real needs versus the demands of those relying on them, and acknowledging the ways in which generosity has been misused. It may require confronting uncomfortable truths, that promises of repayment were never kept, that effort and initiative were replaced with entitlement, and that repeated acts of kindness have inadvertently enabled dependency. Awareness alone, however, is not enough. The next step involves establishing clear, enforceable boundaries. This might mean cutting off financial access, reclaiming accounts, or refusing to provide further support without accountability. Such measures often provoke resistance, guilt-tripping, or hostility from those accustomed to taking advantage. The challenge lies in standing firm, knowing that breaking free is necessary for long-term stability and personal well-being. The process of reclaiming control over finances also requires practical strategies, documenting transactions, securing assets, and consulting with professionals, whether legal advisors, financial planners, or trusted confidants, provides the foundation for decisive action. In many cases, this includes revoking access previously granted to family members or friends, and making difficult decisions about who will no longer benefit from one's generosity. While these steps may initially provoke confrontation or even anger, they are essential for ending the cycle of exploitation. Financial independence is not merely about money. It is about empowerment, self-respect, and the ability to make choices free from coercion or manipulation. Breaking free from financial exploitation is rarely a solitary endeavor. Emotional support is critical, as the exploited individual may face feelings of isolation, shame, or guilt. Sharing experiences with trusted friends, advisors, or support networks can provide perspective and reinforce the resolve necessary to enforce boundaries. Therapy or counseling may also be valuable, helping the individual process the trauma of betrayal and the complex emotions that arise when trusted relationships are redefined. Recognizing that emotional detachment is sometimes required does not diminish care or compassion, but rather ensures that generosity does not come at the cost of personal ruin. The consequences of financial exploitation can extend beyond money, affecting personal relationships, emotional health, and future planning. Victims may feel resentment, anger, or sorrow for having been deceived or taken advantage of. Yet the act of breaking free can be liberating, transforming feelings of vulnerability into empowerment. It allows individuals to reclaim their time, energy, and resources, and to redirect them toward endeavors that are meaningful, sustainable, and mutually respectful. The experience often leads to a reevaluation of priorities, a deeper understanding of personal boundaries, and a clearer sense of the value of one's labor and resources. Breaking free is not simply about severing ties. It is about establishing a sustainable system where generosity is balanced with accountability. This requires communication, assertiveness, and the ability to enforce limits without being manipulated by guilt or emotional blackmail. The exploited individual learns that giving must come from a place of choice rather than obligation, and that enforcing boundaries is not cruelty but self-preservation. Over time, this approach nurtures healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than dependence or exploitation. Ultimately, breaking free from financial exploitation is a transformative process. It is the point at which one chooses personal empowerment over continued victimhood, and where lessons of trust, boundaries, and responsibility crystallize into actionable wisdom. It teaches the importance of discernment in relationships, the necessity of protecting one's resources, and the value of self-respect in all financial dealings. The journey is often difficult, fraught with emotional turbulence and confrontation, but it ultimately leads to freedom, clarity, and the ability to engage in generosity on one's own terms. True liberation comes not only from reclaiming money or assets, but from the reclamation of autonomy, dignity, and the confidence to live without fear of exploitation. Those who emerge from this struggle find themselves not only financially secure, but emotionally resilient, equipped to offer support in ways that are healthy, meaningful, and sustainable. Breaking free is not the end of generosity. Rather, it is the beginning of giving wisely, with intention, and with the assurance that kindness will never again be mistaken for obligation. Confronting betrayal and criminal deception is an experience that shakes the very foundations of trust, reshaping how one perceives relationships, loyalty, and personal boundaries. Betrayal is never easy to face. It cuts deeper when it comes from someone close, someone whose intentions were presumed to be pure, whose promises were believed without hesitation, and whose presence was once a source of comfort and security. The sting of betrayal is compounded when it intertwines with criminal deception, turning emotional pain into a tangible threat that impacts not only feelings but finances, personal safety, and legal standing. It is a collision of trust with deliberate malfeasance, a confrontation that forces the betrayed to navigate a labyrinth of shock, anger, and the urgent need for justice. Unlike ordinary misunderstandings, criminal deception carries consequences that extend far beyond hurt feelings. It threatens stability, reputation, and the very future of the person who has been wronged. The first recognition of betrayal is often accompanied by disbelief. There is an instinctive refusal to accept that someone one has cared for or relied upon could intentionally act against them. When deception is criminal, the disbelief deepens because it is no longer just an emotional wound. It is a violation of law, morality, and the implicit social contract that governs trust between people. Documents may be forged, money misappropriated, or identities exploited, and each discovery adds a layer of shock that is both numbing and enraging. The realization that a loved one has crossed the line from self-interest into deliberate wrongdoing creates an internal tempest. Emotions collide: grief for the loss of trust, fury at the audacity, and fear of the consequences for one's life and livelihood. The betrayed individual is suddenly thrust into a world of uncertainty, where decisions must be made quickly and carefully, because hesitation may allow the deception to continue unchecked. Confronting this type of betrayal requires both mental fortitude and strategic thinking. The emotional response, though natural and intense, must be tempered with clarity to effectively address the criminal element. Documentation becomes essential. Gathering evidence of the wrongdoing, recording communications, and compiling proof of fraudulent activity are crucial steps in establishing the truth. Legal counsel is often necessary to navigate the complexities of the law and to ensure that the perpetrator cannot continue their schemes. Confrontation in such cases is rarely a matter of simple conversation. It is a careful, deliberate process that combines emotional resilience with procedural action. The person facing betrayal must not only manage their own feelings of hurt and anger, but also anticipate the manipulative responses of the individual who has committed the deception, who may attempt to shift blame, rewrite history, or employ intimidation tactics to regain control. The psychological toll of confronting betrayal and criminal deception is profound. Trust, once broken, is not easily restored. The betrayed may experience anxiety, hypervigilance, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability, knowing that someone close has exploited their confidence for personal gain. Self-doubt can creep in, leading to questions about judgment, the ability to discern character, and even the worthiness of one's own kindness. The process of exposure, presenting evidence, making legal reports, and ultimately facing the perpetrator requires immense courage because it forces one to relive the details of the deception repeatedly. Every interaction becomes a test of composure, as the perpetrator may attempt to provoke, manipulate, or emotionally destabilize the victim. Confrontation is not merely about reclaiming what was lost. It is about asserting personal agency and refusing to allow exploitation to continue. Criminal deception complicates the dynamic of betrayal because it introduces tangible, measurable harm into what might otherwise be an interpersonal conflict. The stakes are high: financial loss, identity theft, fraud, and potential threats to reputation. The confrontation, therefore, is grounded in evidence-based action, not just emotional discourse. Police involvement, legal documentation, and professional consultation are often necessary to ensure accountability. Unlike ordinary betrayal, where reconciliation might be possible, criminal deception demands consequences. It forces the betrayed to step out of the emotional sphere and into the realm of justice, where the rules are explicit and the consequences are binding. The confrontation becomes both a shield and a sword. A shield to protect oneself from further exploitation, and a sword to hold the perpetrator accountable for the harm inflicted. The act of confronting betrayal and criminal deception is transformative. It changes the way one approaches relationships, teaches the importance of vigilance, and underscores the value of self-protection. Boundaries become non-negotiable. Trust is no longer freely given, but must be earned and verified. This confrontation also serves as a turning point, providing clarity on who genuinely respects boundaries and who seeks to exploit generosity and goodwill. The experience, though painful, can ultimately foster resilience, sharpen judgment, and instill the courage necessary to navigate complex interpersonal and legal landscapes in the future. It reveals the distinction between loyalty and obligation, between love and manipulation, and between trust and blind faith. Yet the journey does not end with exposure. Confronting betrayal and criminal deception is as much about recovery as it is about justice. Healing requires time, reflection, and often the restructuring of one's life to prevent future exploitation. It demands reestablishing control over finances, personal information, and decision-making authority. Emotional healing is equally vital, as the shock of betrayal can leave lingering wounds that affect new relationships and daily functioning. Support systems, including trusted friends, professionals, or counselors, become crucial in navigating this process. Through confrontation and recovery, the individual emerges not only with justice achieved, but also with strengthened resolve and a deeper understanding of self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of discernment in relationships. Ultimately, confronting betrayal and criminal deception is a test of courage, wisdom, and resilience, It forces individuals to face the unpleasant realities of human behavior, to act decisively in defense of themselves, and to redefine the terms on which they will allow trust to exist in the future. It is a collision of morality, legality, and personal strength, requiring the simultaneous navigation of emotion and strategy. While the process is often painful, the outcome offers empowerment, protection, and the invaluable knowledge that one can survive and even thrive. After betrayal, confrontation is not just about punishing wrongdoing. It is about reclaiming agency, establishing justice, and ensuring that generosity and trust are never exploited again. It transforms victimhood into authority, confusion into clarity, and vulnerability into resilience, marking a pivotal moment where integrity meets action, and betrayal is met with unwavering resolve. Reclaiming life and protecting innocence is a journey that blends courage, responsibility, and unwavering love, often emerging from the crucible of betrayal, exploitation, or neglect. It is the act of reclaiming control over one's own existence after years of being manipulated, used, or burdened by the irresponsibility of others, and simultaneously taking on the sacred duty of shielding those who are vulnerable from the consequences of others. Failures, life, when hijacked by toxic relationships, financial exploitation, or deceit, can feel as though it has been stolen. Every decision made for someone else, every sacrifice silently endured, every dream deferred to preserve someone else's comfort. Reclaiming life requires a profound reckoning with this reality, the courage to sever ties with toxicity, and the determination to create a life that is no longer dictated by others. Greed or entitlement, it is a process that demands strength, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to prioritizing the well-being of oneself and those who cannot protect themselves. The first step in reclaiming life is acknowledging the depth of the harm that has been endured. For many, this harm is not only financial, but emotional and psychological. The constant stress of managing the irresponsibility or manipulations of others can erode confidence, cloud judgment, and leave one feeling powerless. Recognition is painful because it forces one to confront the extent to which personal freedom has been compromised, the ways in which energy has been diverted from personal growth, and the sacrifices that have been made for individuals who may never have deserved them. It is a moment of clarity in which the weight of years of unreciprocated effort becomes undeniable. Acceptance of this reality is critical, not as an act of despair, but as the foundation upon which change is built. Protecting innocence becomes inseparable from reclaiming life when vulnerable individuals, often children or dependents, are caught in the crossfire of adult irresponsibility. Innocence is fragile, easily compromised by neglect, exposure to toxic behavior, or the failure of adults to provide stability. Those who seek to reclaim life while protecting innocence must balance the hard decisions required to free themselves with the responsibility to shield those who rely on them. This can manifest in legal actions, interventions, or creating environments where safety and well-being are prioritized above all else. Protecting innocence is a proactive, conscious effort. It is about providing structure, stability, and security, ensuring that the youngest and most vulnerable are not forced to endure the chaos created by those who have previously exploited or deceived. It is both an emotional and practical undertaking, requiring foresight, vigilance, and an unwavering commitment to the welfare of those under one's care. The act of reclaiming life often involves setting firm boundaries and making difficult decisions. For someone who has long enabled destructive behavior, this may include cutting off financial support, enforcing accountability, or pursuing legal action against those who have caused harm. These steps are rarely easy, as they challenge long-standing dynamics, provoke resistance, and can elicit guilt from both the victim and those who are now being held accountable. Yet these decisions are necessary to create a life that is no longer defined by manipulation, coercion, or exploitation. They are also essential for creating a stable environment for the innocent, who are often the hidden casualties of unchecked adult behavior. By asserting control over their own life, the individual simultaneously models responsibility, resilience, and self-respect, demonstrating that safety and integrity must take precedence over enabling destructive habits. Reclaiming life and protecting innocence also requires a profound shift in perspective. It is not enough to simply cut ties or enforce rules. One must also cultivate a life that reflects personal values, aspirations, and the kind of world they want to create for those under their care. This may include developing routines that foster growth, nurturing emotional and physical well-being, and creating spaces of stability, love, and trust. The focus moves from reaction to proactive stewardship, teaching lessons through structure, modeling integrity through action, and instilling a sense of security and confidence in the innocent that their world is being protected. It is a transformation that goes beyond the immediate removal of toxic influences. It is the deliberate construction of a life where safety, dignity, and opportunity are restored. Emotional resilience is central to this process. Reclaiming life after prolonged exploitation or betrayal can provoke feelings of anger, sorrow, or lingering doubt. Protecting innocence simultaneously heightens the stakes because it demands the ability to manage personal emotions while ensuring that the vulnerable are shielded from trauma. Maintaining composure, clarity, and purpose becomes a daily practice. It requires one to act decisively in the moment, prioritize the long-term welfare of those under their care, and resist being manipulated by guilt or emotional pleas from those who have caused harm. The interplay between reclaiming personal agency and safeguarding the innocent creates a sense of empowerment that is both liberating and humbling. It demonstrates that strength is not merely the ability to protect oneself, but the capacity to act selflessly in service of those who cannot advocate for themselves. The consequences of reclaiming life and protecting innocence extend far beyond the immediate resolution of conflict or crisis. Financial stability is restored, emotional burdens are lifted, and opportunities for personal growth and fulfillment are renewed. For the innocent, these actions establish a foundation for healthy development, security, and trust, counteracting the destabilizing effects of neglect or exploitation. Over time, a new equilibrium emerges, one where generosity, love, and guidance are not conflated with exploitation, and where boundaries and accountability provide a framework for growth rather than a source of tension or resentment. The process reshapes relationships, strengthens character, and instills a profound sense of agency. Ultimately, reclaiming life and protecting innocence is a testament to courage, integrity, and compassion. It requires the bravery to confront painful truths, the discipline to enforce boundaries, and the foresight to nurture and defend the vulnerable. It is an act of empowerment that restores balance to a world previously dominated by manipulation, greed, or irresponsibility. In reclaiming life, one no longer lives under the weight of exploitation or betrayal. In protecting innocence, one ensures that those who cannot protect themselves have a chance at a future defined by stability, love, and opportunity. Together, these actions form a path toward liberation, self-respect, and the creation of a legacy that prioritizes care, accountability, and justice. The journey is neither simple nor painless, but it is transformative, marking the moment when one moves from being burdened by the failures of others to living fully, deliberately, and with purpose, while safeguarding the purity and potential of those who depend on them.